What if everything you believe about your life is a story you invented to make reality easier to survive? Not a comforting story, not a noble one, just a story. Most of us grow up inside a pre-packaged version of reality. God's plan, karma, destiny, some invisible hand threading meaning through everything that happens to us. And we cling to these ideas, not always because we've examined them, but because the alternative is a silence so vast it terrifies us. But what if the universe genuinely doesn't know your name? What if it doesn't owe you a purpose, isn't watching your choices, and will continue on without interruption whether you live with courage or die in mediocrity? At first, that sounds like the worst thing you could hear, but Friedrich Nietzsche thought it was the most liberating truth a person could face. He believed that once you stop waiting for meaning to arrive from the outside, once the illusion fully collapses, you're left standing at the only real crossroads in a human life. Do you hide from the emptiness, or do you become the kind of person who creates something inside it? By the end of this video, you'll understand why the void you've been taught to fear might be the only place where genuine freedom actually lives. Act 1. The Pattern Machine. Every human being is born into a story someone else wrote. Before you were old enough to question reality, it had already been answered for you, your parents, your culture, your religion. Each handed you a different story, but they all shared the same promise underneath. Your life has a purpose. You are here for a reason. And here's the uncomfortable part. That belief isn't entirely irrational. From an evolutionary standpoint, the human brain is a pattern recognition engine. It kept us alive. If the grass moved, you assumed a predator. If you didn't, you were eaten. Over hundreds of thousands of years, pattern finding became our greatest strength. But it also built in a flaw we've never quite fixed. We don't just find patterns in nature. We create them in our lives. We turn coincidence into fate, random events into destiny, setbacks into hidden plans. Not because they are those things, but because the alternative is genuinely harder to sit with. The alternative being, maybe there is no plan. Strip the stories away. What are you actually? A temporary arrangement of matter, carbon, water, electrical impulses, obeying the same physical laws as every other organism that has ever briefly existed on this planet before returning to dust. The universe never promised you were special. And when that realization lands, really lands, most people don't confront it. They panic. Then they run. They fill the silence with noise, work, scrolling, entertainment, busyness. Anything that puts enough static between themselves and the question that won't stop forming. If no one is writing this story, who am I? That panic, Nietzsche believed, is where everything begins. Because it's a fork in the road, and which path you take determines almost everything about the kind of life you'll actually live. One path leads to what he called the last man. The other leads somewhere far more demanding and far more real. But before we get there, we need to understand what Nietzsche actually meant when he dropped the phrase that got him misquoted for over a century. Act 2. God is dead, and you've been reading it wrong. You've heard the phrase. Most people use it like a slogan, either to sound edgy or to dismiss Nietzsche as an angry atheist. He was neither, and the phrase means something almost no one talks about. God is dead was not a celebration. It was a diagnosis. Nietzsche wasn't attacking faith as a personal belief. He was pointing at something structural, the invisible scaffolding that entire civilizations had built their sense of meaning on. For centuries, people didn't just believe in God. They borrowed their entire framework for reality from that idea. What is right? What is wrong? Why we suffer? What we owe each other? Where we're going? These weren't open questions. They were pre-answered. built into the foundations before most people ever had the chance to question them. Then, slowly, that foundation cracked. Science started offering different explanations. Authority stopped feeling absolute. The old answers didn't disappear overnight, but they stopped feeling inevitable. And something Nietzsche recognized, something most of his contemporaries missed entirely, was that this wasn't just a religious shift, it was a meaning crisis. Because when the framework collapses, it doesn't leave clarity behind, it leaves a gap. Think of it like a building everyone has lived in for so long that no one remembers what it looks like from the outside. Life continues normally inside it, but beneath the floors, the foundation is hollowing out. And one day, without warning, the weight of everything built on top of it becomes too much. That's what Nietzsche meant. Not the death of a being, the collapse of a structure. And the question that follows that collapse is immediate and brutal. If there's no higher authority anymore, who decides what matters? Here's what actually happens when people lose the framework but don't face the question. They fill the gap with whatever's nearby. Politics, status, money, identity, pleasure, productivity. Not because these things are necessarily meaningful, but because they're loud enough to drown out the silence where meaning used to live. That's where nihilism begins, not in some dramatic moment of existential despair, just quietly, gradually, in the noise you use to avoid the question you never answered. And this is where Nietzsche stops being a pessimist, because he didn't think the collapse was the end. He thought it was an opening, a moment where, for perhaps the first time, nothing is assigned to you. No script from the outside, no cosmic guarantee, no borrowed purpose. Just the question, standing in front of you, waiting. If nothing is given, what will you choose to create? Most people never answer it. They avoid it instead. And the mechanism through which they avoid it, Nietzsche had a name for that too. Act 3, the herd and the comfortable disappearing act. Imagine standing in front of that vacuum. The old answers are gone. No universal script. No guaranteed purpose. So what does the average person actually do? They don't become philosophers. They don't wrestle with the abyss. They do something much simpler and much more insidious. They look around at what everyone else is doing, and they follow. Nietzsche called this person the last man. Not a villain, not a monster, just someone who has made comfort their highest value, and in doing so, has quietly stopped growing. The last man doesn't ask difficult questions because they disturb his peace. Doesn't take real risks because uncertainty feels dangerous. Instead of building his own values, he borrows the ones already circulating around him. And because everyone nearby is doing exactly the same thing, it never feels like borrowing. It just feels like life. Before long, life stops being something you consciously choose. It becomes something you repeat. Work, consume, scroll, repeat. From the outside, everything looks fine. But underneath, intention has gone missing. That's what Nietzsche meant by the herd. Not that people are stupid, but that following the crowd removes responsibility. If everyone already agrees on what success looks like, what career is respectable, what kind of life has value, you never have to stop and ask whether you actually want any of it. Someone else has already decided. And modern life has made this easier and harder to notice than ever before. Before you've had your first conscious thought of the day, an algorithm is already deciding what you see. One video becomes 10. 1 hour of scrolling becomes 2. Your attention, the only real resource you ever had, stops belonging to you, and you barely notice because the transition is frictionless. Try something. Sit in a quiet room for 10 minutes. No phone, no music, no podcast, nothing. At first it's fine, then it gets uncomfortable. And then, right around the point where most people would reach for their phone, the questions you've been running from start to surface. Am I living the life I actually want? Or the one I happen to fall into? Who would I be if no one expected anything from me? Those questions feel dangerous, not because they're harmful, but because answering them might force you to change. And change means risk. And risk means the herd might not recognize you anymore. So instead, you stay busy. You stay entertained. Comfort quietly replaces ambition. Familiarity replaces freedom. Routine replaces growth. And then one day you wake up inside a life that looks like yours, but doesn't feel like it was ever truly chosen. Here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. If you never build your own sense of purpose, something else will build one for you. A corporation will define your success. An algorithm will decide what deserves your attention. Society will tell you what kind of life is worth living. It's not a conspiracy. It doesn't require malice. It just requires your silence, and you've been giving it freely. No one is coming to rescue you from this. No philosophy, no teacher, no video. The responsibility has always been yours. You've just been taught to hand it over. So, before you look for the next answer from the outside, ask yourself one question. If all the noise disappeared tomorrow, would you still know which direction to walk? Because if you don't know, and most people don't, then you're already inside the herd. The good news is that the herd has no locked gates. It just convinces you that leaving would cost too much. And it's exactly there, at that threshold, that Nietzsche introduces the alternative. Act 4. The Architect, the Übermensch. So if the last man spends his life avoiding the void, what does the other path actually look like? This is where Nietzsche introduces the Übermensch, and where almost everyone gets it wrong. He wasn't describing a superhero. He wasn't talking about domination, genetic superiority, or anyone else's Nazi-era misappropriation. He was describing something far simpler and far more demanding. A person who lives without borrowed meaning. Here's the paradox at the center of it. If the universe genuinely doesn't come with a built-in purpose, if no meaning is assigned to you, then that feels like bad news at first. But follow it one step further. If no purpose was assigned to you, then no purpose can be taken away from you either. A meaningless universe isn't just empty, it's open. Most of us have been taught that freedom means more options, more money, more time, more opportunities. Nietzsche was pointing at something deeper. The freedom to stop measuring your life against standards you never actually chose. You don't have to reach a certain income by 30 because society decided that's what success looks like. You don't have to chase someone else's version of a meaningful career. You don't even have to keep living by values that were handed to you, if, after honest examination, you find they were never yours to begin with. This isn't the freedom to reject everything, just to be different. That's just reaction, and reaction is still letting the outside world set the terms. This is the freedom to take full responsibility for deciding who you're going to become. Notice the difference in the questions. The last man asks, "What is the meaning of life?" and waits for an answer from somewhere outside himself. The Übermensch asks, "What kind of life is worth building?" and accepts that the answer has to come from within. One waits, the other creates. And meaning, in Nietzsche's view, isn't something buried in the universe waiting to be discovered. It's something you construct through the choices you make, through the work you choose to pursue, the values you refuse to compromise, the person you become, not once, in a single dramatic moment of clarity, but daily, incrementally, through how you actually live. You stop being a consumer of meaning. You become its author. Of course, this is harder than following the herd. Authoring your own values means standing alone sometimes, making mistakes with no external framework to blame, walking without a sign telling you you're on the right path. But that's the exact price of genuine freedom. There is no version of it that comes without discomfort. What changes eventually is how you see the void. You stop seeing it as something that needs to be filled with noise and distraction. You start seeing it for what it actually is, a blank canvas. And while most people stand in front of that blankness and feel terror because nothing has been painted yet, the Übermensch feels something else entirely. For the first time, the brush is in his own hands. Act 5. The only question that matters. So here we are. The comforting stories have been stripped away. You've seen why the old frameworks collapse, why most people escape into the herd, and why Nietzsche believed the only real alternative was to become the author of your own life. But none of this means anything. Nothing unless you do something with it. I can't give you a purpose. Nietzsche wouldn't either. The moment someone hands you a purpose and you accept it without examination, you've missed everything. You've just replaced one master with another. So when this video ends, don't do what most people do. Don't immediately click the next recommendation. Don't open the comments to see what other people think you should feel. Don't reach for the phone before you've even had 30 seconds to think. Put it down. Sit in the silence. Let the questions you've been running from finally catch up with you. Ask yourself one thing, and be honest. If no one was watching, no expectations from your family, your friends, your past self, what kind of life would you actually choose to build? Not the life that looks impressive, not the one that gets applause, the one you could genuinely call your own. You may not have an answer today. That's fine. The goal isn't to leave with everything solved. The goal is to stop outsourcing the question, because whether you recognize it or not, you are already creating a life. Every habit you repeat, every conversation you avoid, every hour you give away to distraction, those are brushstrokes. The canvas is being painted either way. The only question is whether you're holding the brush. Your greatest resource isn't money, isn't talent, isn't time. It's your attention. And right now, dozens of systems, algorithms, advertisers, social structures, the herd, are competing to own it. They don't need your consent. They just need your silence. The question is whether you'll keep giving it away. Nietzsche believed the universe would never hand you meaning. Maybe he was right. But that also means the blankness in front of you isn't a punishment. It's an invitation. When this video fades to black, don't rush to fill the silence. Sit with it, because somewhere inside that silence is the person you've been waiting to become. The rest is entirely up to you.